When times were tough and grocery stores didn't exist, farm families had to make do with what they had. These ingenious cooks created recipes that fed generations, using simple ingredients and techniques handed down through family lines. These forgotten recipes aren't just about survival. They tell stories of American resilience, community, and making something special out of ordinary ingredients. Let's rediscover these treasures from our past. Corn pone. When baking powder and eggs were unavailable or too expensive, Southern farm cooks developed corn pone, a simple bread made from cornmeal, water, and salt, mixed into a thick batter and cooked in a skillet or formed into oblong shapes and baked. Corn pone provided a filling accompaniment to beans, greens, or stews. The simplicity of corn pone made it accessible even to the poorest families or during the most difficult economic times. Unlike cornbread, it required no leavening or enrichment, yet still provided substantial calories and nutrition. Some variations added a small amount of bacon grease for flavor and to prevent sticking. Corn pone occupies an important place in Southern cultural history and literature. It appears in works by William Faulkner, Mark Twain, and other writers as a symbol of rural Southern life. The term even entered political discourse, with corn pone opinions referring to conventional popular viewpoints. Vinegar pie. It sounds impossible. How could vinegar ever be the star of a dessert? But this Depression-era creation shows just how resourceful farm families could be. When fresh fruit wasn't available, especially during winter months, the tangy acid from vinegar mimicked the brightness of lemons or apples in a simple, custard-based pie. The magic happens when you balance the vinegar with sugar and spices like cinnamon or nutmeg. These ingredients were shelf-stable pantry staples that most farm families kept on hand year-round. The result was a pie that tasted surprisingly like apple pie, but required no fresh fruit whatsoever. What's remarkable is how this pie crossed regional boundaries. From Appalachia to the Midwest, families developed their own variations, some adding a touch of vanilla or lemon extract when available. It's a testament to American ingenuity that one of the most sour ingredients in the kitchen could transform into a sweet ending to a simple meal. Ham bone soup. In farm kitchens, nothing went to waste, especially not something as valuable as a ham bone. After a holiday, ham was enjoyed. The bone, with bits of meat still clinging to it, became the foundation for meals that could feed a family for days afterward. The technique was simple but effective. Simmer the ham bone in water with dried beans, root vegetables, and whatever herbs were on hand. The long cooking process extracted maximum flavor from the bone while allowing dried beans to soften and absorb the smoky essence of the ham. This hearty soup provided protein, fiber, and warmth, all in one economical pot. Beyond its practical benefits, ham bone soup represented the thrifty wisdom that guided farm cooking, the understanding that food was too precious to waste, and that sometimes the most humble ingredients could produce the most satisfying meals. This philosophy of stretching resources helped countless families survive economic hardships. Scripture cake, also known as Bible cake, this recipe served dual purposes in rural communities. It provided both a delicious spice cake and a clever way to encourage Bible study, particularly among children. Each ingredient was listed only by its biblical reference, requiring bakers to look up scriptures to determine the ingredients. For example, Judges 5:25 indicated butter, while Jeremiah 6:20 referred to sweet cane, sugar. The completed recipe produced a fruit and nut cake similar to modern fruit cake, but with educational and religious significance beyond mere sustenance. This cake exemplifies how farm families integrated faith into daily activities, using ordinary tasks like baking to reinforce religious education. The recipe appears in community cookbooks from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, particularly from rural churches and women's organizations. Potato candy. When sugar rationing hit during World War II, farm families got creative with their sweets. Potato candy emerged as an ingenious way to stretch limited sugar supplies while still providing a treat for children and adults alike. The secret ingredient? A single mashed potato The starchy base of the potato allowed candy makers to use less sugar while maintaining the right consistency. After mixing the potato with powdered sugar to form a dough, it would be rolled flat, spread with peanut butter, and then rolled into a log. Once chilled, it could be sliced into pinwheel candies that delighted everyone. What made potato candy special wasn't just its economical use of ingredients, but how it became a tradition passed from mother to daughter, especially in Appalachian and southern communities. Even today, many grandmothers still make this simple treat around holidays, connecting modern families to their Depression-era ancestors. Soda cracker pie. When the cupboard was nearly bare, farm cooks could work wonders with just a few common ingredients. Soda cracker pie emerged from this necessity, using everyday saltine crackers as the base for a surprisingly sophisticated dessert that mimicked the texture and flavor of more expensive nut-based pies. Crushed saltines formed the bulk of the filling, held together with beaten egg whites, sugar, and vanilla. When baked, the crackers softened and took on an almost nutty flavor. Topped with whipped cream and perhaps some fresh fruit when available, this humble pie could pass for something far more extravagant. What made this recipe particularly valuable was its affordability and shelf-stable ingredients. Every farm kitchen kept crackers on hand, and chickens provided eggs year-round. When company came unexpectedly, soda cracker pie could be whipped up quickly from pantry staples, allowing farm families to maintain their reputation for hospitality even during lean times. Leather britches beans. Long before freeze-drying or modern canning methods, farm families needed ways to preserve the summer harvest for winter months. Leather britches beans, sometimes called shucky beans, represent one of the most effective preservation techniques that kept families fed through cold months. Fresh green beans would be strung whole on cotton string, then hung to dry near a fireplace or in a sunny window until completely dehydrated. The process turned them tough and leathery, hence the name, but preserved them for months without refrigeration. When winter came, these beans would be reconstituted by soaking and then slow-cooked, often with a piece of salt pork for flavor. This Appalachian tradition dates back to early American settlers and was particularly important in mountain communities where winter months could bring isolation and limited access to fresh food. The distinct earthy flavor of leather britches beans became so beloved that many families continued making them even after modern preservation methods became available. Milk toast. Before modern medicine, home remedies passed through generations, provided comfort during illness. Milk toast was both everyday food and a traditional remedy for upset stomachs or recuperating family members. The simple combination of buttered toast in warm, sweetened milk provided easy-to-digest nutrition. What made milk toast special was its versatility. It could be breakfast for a healthy family, comfort food for someone feeling under the weather, or a late-night snack when other options were limited. Farm families appreciated how it used their own dairy products and homemade bread, requiring no special ingredients. This dish appears in American literature from the early 20th century, showing how embedded it was in daily life. The term milquetoast to describe a timid person actually derives from this dish, perceived as bland and inoffensive, though those who grew up with milk toast might disagree with that characterization. Switchel, before sports drinks or soda became widespread, farm workers needed something refreshing to sustain them through long days of physical labor. Switchel, sometimes called haymaker's punch, provided both hydration and energy through a simple combination of water, vinegar, ginger, and sweetener, usually molasses or maple syrup. This drink dates back to colonial America, when it was recognized that the vinegar helped quench thirst more effectively than plain water, while the ginger settled the stomach and the sweetener provided quick energy. Carried to the fields in large jugs, switchel was an essential part of harvest time when workers needed constant refreshment. What's fascinating about this drink is how it represents early nutritional wisdom. Farm families understood the need for electrolyte replacement during heavy work long before sports science existed. Today, as natural alternatives to commercial sports drinks gain popularity, Switchel has experienced a revival in artisanal food circles. Mock apple pie. During the Great Depression and World War II, when fresh apples were expensive or seasonal, resourceful cooks developed a remarkable substitute that mimicked the flavor and texture of apple pie using an unlikely ingredient. Ritz crackers. The secret was in the spices, cinnamon, lemon juice, and cream of tartar, created a flavor profile so similar to apples that many people couldn't tell the difference. When baked in a traditional pie crust with a bit of sugar and butter, the crackers softened to a texture remarkably similar to cooked apples. While this recipe later became famous when printed on Ritz cracker boxes in the 1930s, its origins lie in farmhouse kitchens, where women experimented with available ingredients to create familiar comforts during difficult times. The recipe demonstrates how innovation thrives during scarcity and how Americans maintained food traditions even when traditional ingredients weren't available. Buttermilk pie. In farm communities where dairy cows were common, buttermilk was an abundant byproduct of butter making. Rather than waste this tangy liquid, farm cooks developed delicious ways to use it, including the simple but beloved buttermilk pie. The filling combines buttermilk with eggs, sugar, a touch of flour, and vanilla to create a custard-like texture, with a subtle tanginess that balances the sweetness. When baked in a pie crust, it forms a delicate caramelized top. Some variations add lemon for extra brightness or nutmeg for warmth. Popular throughout the South and in Appalachia, buttermilk pie represented thrifty farm cooking at its finest, transforming what might be considered a waste product into a dessert, special enough for Sunday, dinner, or church socials. Even as commercial buttermilk became available, many families preferred to make this pie with the genuine article from their own butter-making, potato donuts. While most modern donuts are made from a yeast or cake batter, farm cooks developed a variation using leftover mashed potatoes that produced exceptionally tender, moist donuts that stayed fresh longer than conventional recipes. The starch in the potatoes helped retain moisture while requiring less flour, making these economical during times when wheat was expensive. Typically spiced with nutmeg or cinnamon and sometimes rolled in sugar after frying, potato donuts became a special weekend treat that made use of leftover potatoes from the week's meals, particularly popular in New England and Midwestern farm communities. These donuts, sometimes called spudnuts, represent the waste-not mentality that governed farm cooking. By the mid-20th century, some small-town bakeries specialized in this style, though most have disappeared as commercial donut chains expanded. Scrapple. In farming communities where pigs were commonly raised, butchering day produced not just primary cuts of meat but also scraps and organ meats that required creative use. Scrapple, particularly associated with Pennsylvania Dutch communities, transformed these leftover parts into a breakfast staple that would keep for months. The process involved boiling the scraps and organs to create a rich broth, then cooking cornmeal and buckwheat flour in this liquid until thick. Seasoned with sage, thyme, and black pepper, the mixture was poured into loaf pans to set, then sliced and fried crisp for breakfast. Scrapple represents the farming ethos of maximum utilization, turning parts that might be discarded into nourishing, flavorful food. Regional variations emerged throughout the mid-Atlantic states, with some communities adding different herbs or flowers, but all sharing the same waste-not philosophy. Chow chow relish. When the late summer garden produced more vegetables than all could be eaten fresh, farm families turned to preservation methods like making chow chow, a tangy, sweet pickle relish that combined multiple vegetables in one colorful condiment. The beauty of chow chow was its flexibility. Recipes varied widely depending on what needed to be preserved. Cabbage often formed the base, but green tomatoes, bell peppers, onions, carrots, and beans could all find their way into the mix. The vegetables were chopped fine, salted overnight, then cooked in a vinegar sugar brine with spices like mustard seed, celery seed, and turmeric. Chow chow's cross-cultural roots reflect America's diverse food heritage. It has ties to both Southern cuisine, Pennsylvania Dutch traditions, and Asian pickle preparations. Each region developed its own variation, from the sweeter Pennsylvania style to the spicier Southern versions. Beyond preservation, chow chow added welcome flavor to winter meals, particularly alongside beans, cornbread, and other staples. Dandelion wine. Long before dandelions were considered lawn nuisances, farm families recognized their value as one of spring's first edible plants. While the greens were often used in salads, the bright yellow flowers became the base for homemade dandelion wine, a tradition brought to America by European immigrants. Making the wine was a family affair. Children would help gather the blossoms, which were then steeped with citrus, sugar, and sometimes herbs before fermenting with yeast. The resulting golden wine had a floral sweetness often compared to mead or a light dessert wine. Because dandelions grew abundantly and wild, this was a luxury that even cash-poor farm families could enjoy. Dandelion wine represents how farm families lived in harmony with their environment, recognizing food value in plants others might overlook. The tradition also connected American farm families to their European heritage, maintaining cultural practices that stretched back generations. Corn cob jelly. In the waste not want not ethic of farm cooking, even corn cobs had value after the kernels were removed. Resourceful cooks discovered that boiling the cobs extracted natural sweetness and pectin that could be combined with sugar to create a delicate, honey-colored jelly. The process was simple. Cobs were simmered in water, then the strained liquid was boiled with sugar until it reached the gelling point. The resulting spread had a subtle corn sweetness that paired beautifully with hot biscuits or cornbread. Some variations added cinnamon or vanilla for additional flavor. This farm tradition demonstrates the extraordinary creativity born of necessity. Before commercial pectin was available, farm cooks knew which plants naturally contained this thickening agent and how to extract it. Corn cob jelly also provided a sweet treat during winter months when fresh fruit was unavailable, using a resource that would otherwise have been discarded. Bread and butter pickles. Before refrigeration, preserving the summer harvest was essential for winter survival. Bread and butter pickles became popular during the Great Depression because they used simple ingredients to transform abundant cucumber crops into flavorful condiments that lasted all year. Unlike traditional dill pickles, bread and butter pickles balanced tanginess with sweetness, using a brine of vinegar, sugar, and spices like celery seed, mustard seed, and turmeric. The name reportedly came from their role as a sandwich filling during hard times, literally eaten on bread with butter when meat wasn't available. Farm families valued these pickles not just for their preserving qualities, but for how they brightened otherwise plain meals throughout winter. A jar of bread and butter pickles could make even the simplest bread and butter sandwich feel special, adding both flavor and a memory of summer abundance during cold months. Graveyard stew. Despite its ominous name, this simple dish provided comfort to generations of farm children and adults alike. Was simply milk toast by another name, pieces of toast in warm milk, sometimes with butter and salt, but the dramatic name made it more appealing to children. Various stories explain the unusual name. Some say it resembled tombstones, toast in snow, milk, while others claim it was a midnight snack eaten quiet as a graveyard. Whatever the origin, the dish provided an easy, digestible meal when someone was feeling unwell or when other food supplies were limited. What makes graveyard stew culturally significant is how it represents the way farm families used storytelling and imagination to make simple foods special. By transforming basic ingredients with nothing more than a creative name, parents could turn a necessity meal into something children would eat without complaint. Hasty pudding. Long before instant foods existed, farm families needed quick meals that could be prepared with minimal effort after a long day of physical labor. Hasty pudding, a simple porridge of cornmeal cooked in water or milk until thick, met this need perfectly. Named hasty because it could be prepared relatively quickly. Compared to bread, this dish appears in American cookbooks dating back to the colonial era. Depending on available ingredients and the meal's purpose, it could be served savory with butter and salt, or sweet with maple syrup or molasses. Hasty pudding connects modern Americans to our colonial past. It was so central to early Americans' life that it's mentioned in folk songs and was reportedly a favorite of both George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. This simple dish sustained American farmers through centuries of nation building. Spoon bread. In the American South, corn was the backbone of farm cooking long before European wheat became widely available. Spoon bread represents the pinnacle of corn cuisine, a dish that transforms simple cornmeal into something so light and soufflé-like that it must be served with a spoon rather than sliced like traditional cornbread. The technique requires beating air into eggs and sometimes whipped egg whites, then folding them into a cornmeal batter enriched with milk and butter. When baked, it puffs dramatically, creating a texture halfway between cornbread and custard. This elevated preparation made spoon bread appropriate for Sunday dinners and special occasions. What's remarkable about spoon bread is how it crossed social boundaries. From humble farm tables to the finest southern mansions, this dish was cherished across economic lines. Thomas Jefferson reportedly served it at Monticello, while countless farm families enjoyed it as their own special occasion dish. New England boiled dinner. In New England farm communities, the boiled dinner represented efficient cooking at its finest, a complete one-pot meal that could simmer unattended while other farm work continued. Centered around corned beef or a smoked pork shoulder, this meal combined meat with cabbage, potatoes, carrots, turnips, and onions, all in one pot. The genius was in the timing. Meat went in first to create a flavorful broth, followed by root vegetables in order of cooking time, with cabbage added last. Everything was cooked until tender, creating a meal that offered a balance of protein, starch, and vegetables with minimal effort. What made the New England boiled dinner culturally significant was its role in community life. It became the traditional Saturday supper in many communities and was often associated with church suppers and community gatherings. The simple preparation allowed farm wives to participate in community activities while still providing a hearty meal at day's end. Sour milk pancakes. In the days before refrigeration, milk soured quickly, especially during warm weather. Rather than waste this resource, farm cooks discovered that sour milk actually made superior pancakes. The acidity reacted with baking soda to create light, fluffy results. These pancakes used ingredients available on most farms: flour, eggs, sour, milk, and baking soda, and could be mixed quickly for breakfast or supper. Served with molasses, maple syrup, or fruit preserves, they transformed what might have been wasted into a beloved meal. This recipe represents the practical chemistry knowledge that farm cooks possessed long before formal education made such information widespread. Through observation and experimentation, they learned which ingredients worked together and how to repurpose foods that had transformed beyond their original state. Liver mush. In farming communities where animals were raised for food, using every part of the animal wasn't just economical, it was considered respectful. Liver mush, particularly popular in southern Appalachia and German-American communities, transformed organ meats into a delicious breakfast staple. The preparation combined finely minced pork liver with cornmeal, herbs, and spices. After cooking, the mixture was formed into loaves that could be sliced and fried until crisp on the outside. Often served with eggs or on a sandwich, liver mush provided excellent nutrition through iron-rich organ meat that might otherwise have been wasted. While modern palates might hesitate at organ meats, this traditional preparation made these nutritious ingredients appealing and accessible. The tradition continues in parts of North Carolina and other southern regions, where some small-town butchers still make liver mush according to generations-old recipes. Pepper pot soup, originally developed by enslaved people on Caribbean plantations. and brought to American farm communities through various cultural exchanges, pepper pot soup transformed inexpensive ingredients into a flavorful, nutritious meal that could simmer all day while other work continued. Traditional versions used tripe, stomach lining, and other offal along with vegetables, peppers, and herbs to create a spicy, rich broth. The long cooking time tenderized the otherwise tough meat and allowed flavors to meld completely. American variations often adapted the recipe based on available ingredients, sometimes using salt pork instead of tripe. This soup represents the cultural exchange that characterized American farm cooking. Techniques and flavors from African, Caribbean, and European traditions blended together as communities shared knowledge. The soup became particularly associated with Philadelphia, but was prepared throughout farming regions as a practical way to use all parts of butchered animals. Salt-rising bread. Before commercial yeast became readily available, farm bakers needed reliable ways to leaven bread. Salt-rising bread, despite its name, uses no salt in the starter. Instead, it captures wild bacteria through a starter made from potatoes or cornmeal left in a warm place overnight. The fermentation process produces a distinctive cheese-like aroma and flavor that distinguishes this bread from yeast-risen loaves. The technique requires attention to temperature and timing, with the starter needing to be kept consistently warm to develop properly. This bread's history stretches back to pioneer days, when it traveled west with settlers who needed to make bread without access to commercial leavening agents. The knowledge was passed from mother to daughter through practical demonstration rather than written recipes, making it a true folk tradition that varied slightly between families and regions. Tomato gravy. In southern farm kitchens, gravy accompanied nearly every meal, stretching limited ingredients and adding flavor to basic staples. Tomato gravy evolved as a way to use summer's abundant tomato harvest in a preparation that complemented cornbread, biscuits, rice, or potatoes. The simple sauce combined fresh or canned tomatoes with flour, fat, usually bacon grease, and seasonings, cooked until thickened. Unlike Italian tomato sauces, southern tomato gravy maintained a distinctly American flavor profile, often incorporating a touch of sugar to balance acidity. This gravy represents the resourcefulness of farm cooking. It transformed seasonal abundance into a versatile sauce that added flavor and nutrition to otherwise plain meals. The preparation crossed racial and economic boundaries in the South, appearing on both black and white tables and in both humble and more prosperous homes. Pickled eggs. In farming communities, spring brought an abundance of eggs as hens responded to increasing daylight. To preserve this seasonal bounty, farm cooks developed various preservation methods, including pickling eggs in vinegar brine with spices. The process was straightforward. Hard-boiled eggs were peeled and packed in jars, with a solution of vinegar, salt, and spices like mustard seed, dill, or red beets for color. Kept in a cool place, these eggs would remain edible for months, providing protein when fresh eggs were less abundant. Pickled eggs became part of social traditions as well as practical food preservation. They were common in rural taverns and at community gatherings where their portable, ready-to-eat nature made them convenient snacks. The tradition continues in parts of rural America, particularly in Pennsylvania Dutch communities. Molasses stack cake. In Appalachian communities where sugar was expensive and molasses was the primary sweetener, special occasions called for spectacular desserts that could be prepared with available ingredients. The molasses stack cake answered this need. Multiple thin layers of molasses cookie-like cake spread with spiced apple butter. What made this cake unique was its community aspect. Often for weddings or large gatherings, each attending family would bring a single layer. Combined at the event, these created an impressive multi-layered cake that represented the community's collective contribution to the celebration. The cake improved over several days as the apple filling softened the firm cookie layers, making it an ideal make-ahead dessert. This practical timing also meant it could be prepared around farm work schedules. While labor-intensive compared to modern cakes, the stack cake's impressive appearance and rich flavor made it worth the effort for special occasions. Buttermilk soup. Germanic farming communities across America, buttermilk soup provided a quick, nourishing meal that made good use of dairy byproducts. The tangy soup combined buttermilk with flour for thickening, eggs for protein, and sometimes fresh herbs or fruit depending on the season. Sweet versions might include berries when available, or dried fruit in winter, while savory variations used potatoes, cucumbers, or sorrel. The soup could be served hot or cold, making it versatile for different seasons. Because it required no meat, it was economical and often served on meatless days. This soup represents the dairy-centered cooking that characterized many European American farm traditions. In communities where butter production was significant, buttermilk was abundant, and these soups transformed what might have been considered a waste product into a valued part of the farm diet. Leather apples. Before modern freezing and canning methods, farm families needed ways to preserve fall apple harvests for year-round use. Leather apples, sometimes called apple leather or fruit leather, provided an ingenious preservation method that maintained both flavor and nutrients. Apples were cooked down to a thick sauce, spread thin on cloths or pans, and dried in the sun or near a fire until leather-like. These flexible sheets could be cut into pieces and reconstituted with water to make pies or sauces throughout the year, or eaten as chewy snacks. What makes apple leather particularly interesting is how it represents pre-industrial food technology. Without electricity, refrigeration, or commercial preservation methods, farm families developed these techniques through generations of practical knowledge, allowing them to enjoy seasonal fruits year-round. Mincemeat. Today's mincemeat pies rarely contain meat, but original farm recipes combined beef or venison with dried fruits, strong spices, and brandy or cider in a preservation technique that transformed less desirable meat cuts into a luxurious treat. The high sugar content, alcohol, and spices all served as preservatives, allowing this mixture to keep for months in cool storage. Traditionally prepared in the fall as animals were butchered, mincemeat would age and develop complex flavors before being used in pies during winter holidays. This tradition connects modern Americans to medieval food technology. The combination of sweet and savory flavors along with preservation through multiple methods dates back centuries. Farm families maintained this tradition long after commercial preservation became available because they valued the complex flavors and holiday associations of traditional mincemeat. Rivel soup. In Pennsylvania, Dutch farm communities, simple ingredients combined in creative ways to provide filling meals even when meat was scarce. Rivel soup used a technique brought from Germany, small dumplings, rivels, made from flour, egg, and salt, were dropped into chicken broth for a filling soup that stretched limited ingredients. The rivels could be made in advance and dried, making this a convenient meal that could be prepared quickly when needed. Farm families appreciated how it transformed basic chicken broth into a more substantial meal, particularly during winter months when fresh vegetables were scarce. This soup represents cultural continuity in American farm traditions. The technique traveled from German-speaking regions of Europe with immigrants, then was adapted to American ingredients and circumstances. Even the name preserves language connections, as rivel derives from the German Reben, to grate or crumble, potato stuffing. Before commercial bread became widely available, farm cooks created stuffing variations that relied less on bread and more on other starchy ingredients. Potato stuffing combined mashed potatoes with onions, celery, herbs, and just enough bread to bind it together. This practical adaptation served multiple purposes. It used readily available potatoes, stretched limited bread supplies, and provided a hearty side dish that complemented chicken, turkey, or pork. The higher moisture content of potatoes also meant the stuffing stayed moist, whether cooked inside a bird or in a separate dish. Particularly popular in Pennsylvania Dutch communities and throughout the Midwest, potato stuffing represents the regional adaptations that characterized American farm cooking. Each community developed variations that reflected both their cultural heritage and the ingredients most readily available in their region. Sows, also known as head cheese or brawn. In different regions, sows represented the ultimate in waste, not want not farm, butchering. This cold meat preparation used parts of the pig that might otherwise be discarded, the head, feet, and other gelatinous portions. These parts were simmered until tender, then picked free of meat, which was mixed with herbs, spices, and the natural gelatin from the cooking process. Packed into molds and chilled, souse set into a sliceable loaf that could be served cold as a sandwich filling or breakfast meat. Souse exemplifies how traditional farm butchering utilized every part of the animal, out of both economic necessity and respect for the life taken. Regional variations developed distinctive flavor profiles. Appalachian versions might use more hot pepper, while Pennsylvania Dutch recipes often included vinegar and sweeter spices. Dried apple stack cake. In mountain communities where fresh fruit was seasonal but celebrations happened year-round, dried apples became the foundation for special occasion desserts. The dried apple stack cake layered thin, firm molasses spice cake layers with filling made from dried apples cooked down into a thick, spiced sauce. Like the molasses stack cake, this dessert often involved community participation, with different families contributing layers for weddings or church events. The assembled cake would be wrapped and stored for several days before serving, allowing the moisture from the filling to soften the cake layers. The use of dried rather than fresh apples made this cake available year-round, and the spices, typically cinnamon, nutmeg, and allspice, helped mask any slight fermentation that might occur in home-dried fruit. This practical solution became so beloved that it remained a tradition even after fresh fruit became more readily available. These forgotten farmhouse recipes tell us so much more than just how to prepare a meal. They reveal the ingenuity, resourcefulness, and community spirit that sustain generations through challenging times. In our modern world of convenience foods and instant meals, these recipes remind us of the creativity that flourishes when resources are limited and the deep satisfaction that comes from making something delicious from humble ingredients. As grocery prices continue to rise and more people look for economical ways to feed their families, these time-tested techniques offer practical solutions wrapped in rich cultural heritage. Perhaps the greatest wisdom from these farm kitchens is that true abundance comes not from having unlimited resources, but from knowing how to transform whatever is available into something that nourishes both body and spirit. If you've enjoyed this journey through America's culinary past, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that connects us to our shared heritage. Leave a comment below with your own family's forgotten recipes or which of these classics you might try in your own kitchen. Sometimes looking backward is the best way to move forward with wisdom and appreciation for the simple pleasures of good food made with care.